The old Ford Bronco rumbled down the winding gravel road, kicking up a plume of dust that billowed against the darkening, late October sky. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of pine and anticipation, tinged with a nervous energy that was starting to settle in. Jake Harper, 32, a man as rugged as the landscape he called home, gripped the steering wheel, his eyes scanning the dense Black Hills National Forest. He was a hunting guide, confident in these woods, but a flicker of something ancient and unshakable danced in his gaze. "All right, folks, we're almost there," Jake announced, his voice a low rumble. "Just a few more miles to the old mining settlement. Good spot for a base camp." Beside him, Lila Monroe, 28, hunched over her professional-grade camera, her fingers expertly adjusting settings. "Perfect," she murmured, more to herself than the others. "The fog's rolling in just right. Ideal for those atmospheric shots." A wildlife photographer from Denver, Lila was a whirlwind of curiosity and skepticism, eager to capture the untamed beauty of the wilderness. In the back, Ethan Walsh, 35, Jake's childhood friend and a mechanic from Spearfish, fidgeted. He was already pale, his eyes darting nervously between the towering pines that pressed in on either side of the road. "You sure about this, Jake?" he asked, his voice a little too high. "I heard stories about these parts. Old stories." Sarah Kim, 30, a nurse from Cheyenne and Lila's friend, patted Ethan's arm reassuringly. "Relax, Ethan, it's just a camping trip. Deer hunting, remember? Not ghost hunting." Sarah was practical, but a subtle tremor in her hand betrayed a nascent nervousness. Jake chuckled, a dry sound that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Stories, huh? You mean the Whispering Pines?" He paused, letting the name hang in the air, thick with unspoken implications. Locals say the miners who vanished back in the 1800s. They weren't just lost, cursed, they say, by some old Native American spirit. Lila snorted, finally looking up from her camera. "Oh, please, Jake, that's just local folklore to keep tourists out. I'm here for deer, not poltergeists." She offered a confident smile. But inside, a tiny seed of unease had been planted. The Black Hills held a certain oppressive quiet, a history that felt palpable. They arrived at the abandoned mining cabin just as twilight deepened into a moonless night. The fog had indeed descended, swirling around the dilapidated structure like ghostly tendrils. They set up their tents near the cabin, the crackle of their campfire providing the only warmth against the encroaching chill. As the night deepened, the forest seemed to come alive with its own sounds, the rustle of leaves, the hoot of an owl. But then, a new sound began to weave its way through the natural symphony. Faint whispers, carried on the wind, barely discernible, yet undeniably there. "Did you hear that?" Ethan whispered, clutching his sleeping bag tighter. Jake, who had been staring intently into the flickering flames, nodded slowly. "Yeah, always happens around here when the fog rolls in just right." He tried to sound nonchalant, but his gaze drifted towards the towering pines surrounding them. Lila, ever the pragmatist, scoffed. "It's just the wind, Ethan, whistling through the branches. It's called the Whispering Pines for a reason." "Right, Jake?" Jake didn't answer immediately. He was up, moving slowly towards a cluster of ancient pines. His hand reached out, brushing against the rough bark of one of the trees. "No," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper himself. "This isn't just the wind." He traced a finger over a series of intricate, almost tribal-looking symbols carved deep into the wood. They weren't recent, they looked very, very old. Ethan whimpered, pulling his sleeping bag over his head. Sarah just stared at the symbols, her practical mind struggling to rationalize their presence. Lila, though still skeptical, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. Blank, underscore, blank. The next morning, the fog clung stubbornly to the trees, transforming the familiar forest into an eerie, monochrome landscape. Despite the unsettling night, the group was determined to continue their hunt. Jake, his usual confidence slightly frayed, led the way, tracking fresh deer prints through the damp undergrowth. "Good size buck," Jake muttered, pointing to a particularly large hoof print. "We're close." They followed the tracks for what felt like hours, deeper and deeper into the hushed woods. Then, abruptly, the tracks vanished, as if the animal had simply disappeared into thin air. "What the hell?" Ethan exclaimed, peering at the ground. "Where'd it go?" "No animal just stops like that," Jake said, a frown deepening on his face. He scanned the surrounding area. His eyes narrowed, looking for any sign, any disturbance. It was Sarah who made the next discovery. A low gasp escaped her lips, drawing the others' attention. Guys, look. They followed her gaze to a small clearing. There, arranged in a grotesque spiral, was a pile of bones. Not old, bleached bones, but fresh ones, still gleaming with a faint, disturbing sheen. They looked like deer bones, but they were arranged with an unnerving artistry, as if by design. That's not natural, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. No animal would do that. Lila, despite her growing unease, raised her camera, snapping a few quick shots of the macabre display. Maybe a predator, she suggested, though the words felt hollow even to her. Jake shook his head, his face grim. No predator arranges bones like that. This is something else. He looked at the bones, then up at the silent, watching trees, a primal fear stirring within him. That night, back at their camp, the whispers returned, but this time, they weren't faint, they were louder, more insistent, weaving through the wind, forming words that sent shivers down their spines. Leave, or join us. Ethan was openly sobbing, huddled in his tent. Sarah was pale, gripping a hunting knife with white knuckles. Lila, despite the terror gripping her, brought her camera to her eye. Through the lens, she caught fleeting shadows, darting between the trees at the edge of their camp. They were too quick, too indistinct to make out. But they were there. When she lowered the camera, the shadows were gone. Did you see that? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Jake, his face etched with grim determination, shook his head. See what? By morning, the worst had happened. Ethan was gone. His tent was ripped open, his sleeping bag shredded into ribbons. Deep, raw claw marks marred the fabric, marks that no known animal could have made. Ethan, Sarah screamed, her voice cracking with terror. Jake, his face a mask of controlled panic, examined the claw marks. These aren't a bear. Or a mountain lion. They're too big, too unnatural. He picked up a piece of Ethan's torn sleeping bag, his hands shaking. Lila, her camera now a heavy, cold weight in her hands, felt a wave of nausea. The skeptical veneer she had clung to was shattering, piece by terrifying piece. Blank, underscore, blank. Desperate, the remaining three began a frantic search for Ethan. They called his name, their voices hoarse with fear, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence of the forest. The whispers, though less defined than the night before, seemed to follow them, a constant, low hum beneath the rustling leaves. They stumbled, almost by accident, into a hidden clearing. It was ancient, untouched, and utterly chilling. A perfect circle of massive, weathered stones stood upright, their surfaces rough and dark. The whispers here were deafening, a cacophony of voices swirling around them, pressing in from all sides. Jake's eyes widened. He scrambled to one of the standing stones, his fingers tracing familiar patterns. The symbols, he breathed, his voice hoarse with realization. They match the ones on the pines. They're everywhere. The symbols were carved into the stones, echoing the eerie markings he'd found on the trees around their camp. Lila, now fully consumed by terror, stared at her camera. She had been taking photos compulsively, a desperate attempt to document the inexplicable. As she scrolled through the images, a cold dread seeped into her bones. Her photos now showed what she had only glimpsed last night, ghostly figures. Their forms transparent and shimmering, with hollow, empty eyes, and among them, in one particularly horrifying shot, she saw a fleeting glimpse of Ethan's face, his eyes wide with terror, his mouth open in a silent scream, his form already translucent, joining the spectral figures. Oh my God, she whispered, her voice choked. They're real, they're all real. As they tried to flee, the forest seemed to shift around them. Paths they had just taken twisted and turned, looping them back to the ominous clearing. It was as if the trees themselves were alive, conspiring against them. We can't get out, Sarah shrieked, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. It's blocking us. Then, with a sickeningly sudden jerk, Sarah was pulled backwards, as if by an invisible hand. Her scream, sharp and agonizing, echoed through the clearing, then abruptly cut off, leaving a terrifying void in its wake. Jake and Lila were alone. The whispers, now a coherent chorus, reverberated through their minds. Join us. Join us. A spectral figure coalesced before them, shimmering into existence from the swirling fog. It was gaunt, impossibly tall, and had no eyes, only empty, dark sockets that seemed to swallow the light. It was the embodiment of the whispers, an entity of pure dread. Your fears, it hissed, its voice a chilling symphony of countless voices, are our sustenance. Jake, his face etched with a desperate resolve, pushed Lila behind him. Run, Lila, now, don't look back. He knew what he had to do. He had to buy her time. With a primal roar, Jake lunged forward, not at the entity, but towards a cluster of the ancient stones, trying to create a diversion, anything to draw its attention away from Lila. The spectral figure turned its attention to him, its eyeless gaze seemingly boring into his very soul. Whispers of his deepest regrets, his hidden fears, flooded his mind, overwhelming him. Lila saw him falter, then collapse, his body quickly becoming translucent, his face contorted in silent agony, joining the ghostly figures that now swirled around the entity. Lila didn't hesitate, tears streaming down her face. She turned and ran, blindly crashing through the undergrowth, the chilling whispers of Jake's last, desperate plea echoing in her ears. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs felt like lead, until the first faint rays of dawn pierced the dense canopy. She emerged from the forest, ragged and terrified, the first golden light of the rising sun a cruel mockery of the darkness she had endured. But the Black Hills had claimed more than just her friends. The whispers followed her, a faint, persistent hum in the back of her mind, haunting her dreams forever. Blank, blank. Back in Denver, surrounded by the mundane comforts of her apartment, Lila found no solace. The whispers were always there, a constant reminder of the unspeakable horrors she had witnessed. She tried to make sense of her last photos, the ones she had taken in that cursed clearing. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the final image. It was a composite, a ghostly tableau of the figures she had photographed. And there, amongst the hollow-eyed specters, were the faces of Jake and Sarah, their eyes wide, their forms translucent, staring back at her from the depths of the forest, forever entwined with the whispering pines. The forest hadn't just taken them, it had made them a part of itself. If you find the story interesting, please like and share this video and leave a comment with your opinion. Don't forget to subscribe to Sweet Revenge and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any new videos.